Today I'm diving into a paper that's honestly not your everyday academic fare. It's called The Brain, the Lift, and the Breakdown of the Real, written by STEVE Sayles. So, if you've ever wondered what happens when common sense falls apart, or, you're alone in a rattling elevator and suddenly reality just sort of cracks, stick around. So, let's zoom in on the core problem the paper explores. At its heart, Sayles' work tackles a really big question. How firm is our grip on reality? Like, what happens when your own brain plays tricks on you? And I'm not saying this has literally happened to me on the third floor with a cup of coffee in hand, but it really makes you wonder if reality is as fixed as we tend to believe, right? The paper uses a short story called The Reality Shift as its jumping off point, so we're not talking number crunching or, rats in mazes. Instead, it's a philosophical deep dive that takes a seemingly goofy event in an old lift and turns it into a serious meditation on whether what we see and feel is actually real. I mean, who among us hasn't felt like we're in a cartoon world when things get weird? And look, all this matters because at some point each of us has to face that moment when our perceptions just don't line up with what we expect. Maybe it's vertigo in a glass elevator, or, like in the story, thinking the lift is literally moving sideways. Suddenly, the structures that hold our world together feel a bit wobbly. So, yeah, it's a bit comedic, but also, deeply unsettling. Sayles opens with this great comic voice. Charlie, the main character, feels like his own brain is rebelling, throwing him a curveball and at one point literally abandoning him, as if the self and the mind are two separate things. It's funny, but it's also pretty eerie. The story turns the brain into a trickster, sometimes helpful, sometimes totally unreliable. When the lift seems to go sideways, Charlie's mind starts spinning out countless explanations. TV prank, ghosts, aliens, interdimensional Stargate. Take your pick. It's almost like the brain can't handle experiences that don't fit its usual script, so it improvises wildly. And here's the interesting philosophical thrust Sayles brings to the table. Maybe our sense of reality is just, a kind of ongoing negotiation inside the mind. The moment things feel wrong, the brain throws stories at the problem until it feels safe again, or at least has something to hang on to. There's a whole series of references to classic philosophical figures, Kant, Husserl, Berkeley, you name it, all trying to wrestle with whether the world is something out there or something put together in part by the perceiving mind. If any of you have wrestled with your own perceptions, you might recognize this feeling of ground disappearing for a split second. It can be scary, but it can also be kind of freeing, or, I guess, funny, if you're Charlie. The story's punchline is when Charlie, still slightly rattled, mutters relative motion to some baffled students. It's a callback to those moments when your train seems to move because another train next to it moves and your brain just fills in the blanks. That's Sayles' point. Explanations, scientific or otherwise, are ways to regain control over an unruly reality, even if they mostly convince only ourselves. In some sense, we're all telling stories to keep from staring too long into the abyss of uncertainty. I love that turn of phrase, not because I want to live in the abyss, but because it's humbling to recognize how thin the walls between normal and weird can be. Crucially, for you, as a listener, the takeaway is that, reality is a little less solid than we pretend. The rituals and routines that get us through the day can be upended at any moment. Sometimes laughter or a cup of coffee, or in Charlie's case, a cigarette, is the only way to move forward. So next time you find yourself in a lift, or anywhere really, wondering if the universe just hiccuped, remember you're in good company. And if your brain starts telling you stories, maybe that's just what it does, negotiating the craziness of being alive.